Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Tracy Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you are tuning in to this episode, whether you're watching or listening. And thank you so much for being here. Also, be sure to head to my website, hrtracy.com, where you can subscribe to my newsletter, which is sent out every week. And you can you can do a whole host of things. You can learn more about career services. You can learn more about me and find other episodes of the podcast or even episodes of podcasts that I've been on that are not my own podcast. So with that, before I get into the topic for this week, I did want to mention that I have a setting enabled through Spotify where listeners can submit voice notes and voice messages. And I actually received a voice message very recently. However, I did not know this. I know this now. The voice messages get cut off at 1 minute. And this person's voice message was just getting to the juicy part and it cut off and there was no additional recording. So if you are the person who sent in the voice message, I didn't get the full scoop. And actually, I should say, if you're the one that sent in the voice message, I don't want to give like information about you or anything like that because I believe your name was there. But just know that I am really interested in being able to help answer whatever questions possible and help you through this situation in your work environment and at work. But I don't know the full scoop, the full story. So you can also send a voice message to me on Instagram if you'd like, which is HR Tracy on Instagram. And you can send a million voice messages or voice notes back to back to back. And I think those have a better time limit, if at all. Otherwise, just submit the voice message again. I believe, why don't I tell you your first initial so that if you're listening to this, then you kind of get like a bit of a heads up that it's you who I'm referring to. If your name begins with an S, you submitted this voice message on May 7th, actually. It's been a month, and I totally forgot to share in the previous episodes that I received your voice message, but it did get cut off. I wish that there was a way that I could like write back to you and say, oh, hey, thanks for submitting your voice message, but I don't know, maybe Spotify has to add that. So if your name starts with an S and you submitted a voice message on May 7th, I only got the first 59 seconds. So please either email me at contact@hrtracy.com, send me another voice message on Spotify, or send me voice notes on Instagram. And I will say that I also just noticed while clicking around my app, my Podcasters for Spotify app, I noticed that there were some responses to the recent episode. And the recent episode was about earned wage access. It was episode 181 called You Earned It, Earned Wage Access Explained. And one of the Q&A questions, I think pretty consistently, actually, we have it set up this way, is what were your favorite takeaways from this episode? And someone said, this is really beautiful. Can we work as a team and talk about HR worldwide? I love that. I think that we should talk about HR worldwide, and we should be, really focused on talking about things that, like earned wage access, that provide employees with, information and access to wages that they've earned. And, I won't go down that rabbit hole again because, of course, I already talked about it last week. But I agree. I think it's really nice to think about how our function within the HR department can improve the lives of others. So thank you to Abby. Oh, this is going to be hard. Agby Emmanuel. This is embarrassing. I really should be able to pronounce usernames better, but I think Agby Emmanuel. I think that's how we say it, but thank you so much for writing in the Q&A. Really appreciate it, reacting to the Q&A. I think I had some other reactions here, but I didn't have a chance to go through them, so I won't read them live and on air, so to speak, because you just never know. Anyway, so this week I want to talk about a brief moment that I mentioned, or a brief thing that I mentioned last week, which is this idea called overemployment. And I said, well, I'm technically overemployed, and this is an episode for another time. Well, the other time, or another time is here. It's nigh, as they say. And so I thought, why not take this week and this week's episode to talk about what overemployment is and what it means, because it is a trend. I think it's kind of just a term that's used to define a trend that we see happening in the world and in the general like working landscape. So for all intents and purposes, when I say I'm overemployed, I'm referring to myself as having quote unquote multiple jobs, which is true and also a bit of a stretch, right? Because anyone can be doing something for themselves, like my podcast or like my consulting business or career coaching business. Technically, I suppose that's a job, but it's not like every single day, right? It varies. It's weekends, it's nights, it's evenings, it's when I'm not working my quote unquote day job. And so when we think about overemployed, I think sometimes the trend does refer to people who are working multiple jobs within the work week. And certainly I find myself doing stuff for the podcast, like, if something comes up through an email or something like that, sure, I'll answer it maybe during the day. But most of the time I'm doing, my quote unquote additional jobs or focusing on my own businesses when I'm not working my full-time job, because as many of you can imagine, a full-time job is a full-time job. And I'm also a mom. So it's like, does that count toward overemployment? I'm having like a moment here. Does it? I'm actually asking. It's not even a rhetorical question. And I realize that I'm recording a podcast and I'm the only one that can answer my own question. Does it count? I mean, I'm going to count it. I'm going to make my own rule here. I'm going to say that a person, whether a mother or father, whatever, is a parent and works an additional job, like works a job and is a parent. I'm going to go ahead and say, on the record, I'm considering that overemployment, because being a parent is a job. As much as it's a rewarding job, it still has a lot of pressure. There's a lot of time consumption, a lot of energy consumption. And I guess maybe it's further defined if someone is a stay-at-home parent and works or does something in addition to that. I have to say, before I kind of read some of this article that I have here that helps us to better understand what overemployment is, I've seen a lot of things on Reddit where people are saying that they are stay-at-home parents, especially stay-at-home moms, who are returning to work from maternity leave. And I don't understand. Because as someone, I feel like I'm qualified to answer this or to like question this, because I am a mother of two. I do work full time. I have my own business. And while I'm not a stay-at-home mom, there's obviously still, like you don't just like turn off being a parent. It's not like you just close your laptop and you're done for the day. I can say without a doubt, there's absolutely no way that I would succeed at being either a mom or an employee if I was a stay-at-home mom while working. There's no way. At some point, you are neglecting one side of the fence. You're either neglecting your duties as a parent or you're neglecting your duties as an employee. So I really don't understand that. That is probably the one place where overemployment doesn't make sense. Like how can you be a stay-at-home parent and a full-time employee? If you can do that, kudos to you. But I mean, maybe it's because I was like launched into having two kids and not one at a time. I don't even think that matters though, because kids are kids and it's a lot of work. So I don't know. I've been seeing this on Reddit, and that's what kind of made me think about this topic of overemployment as an episode, because inevitably, if you are a stay-at-home parent, like you are, especially for infants, you're feeding, you're diaper changing, you're going on walks, you're getting them down for naps, you're doing all of these things. How do you reasonably sit in on meetings or get work done? Maybe it's easier to get project-based work done because you can kind of just like flex what that looks like. But if you're in a meet, like how do you go to meetings? If you're customer facing, how do you support customers? If you're on the back end and fully internal, like how, I don't know, maybe I just don't understand, but I would think, and I say this with all humility, that it's impossible to succeed at being a stay-at-home parent and a full-time employee for a, let's say, a corporate, like a demanding job. Because maybe if you're out of the, and specifically remote, because maybe if you're out of the home, so to speak, and you go into the office, then I guess you're technically not a stay-at-home parent. Maybe you're a part-time stay-at-home parent. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too deeply on this, but I think being a stay-at-home parent is a full-time job, and it's not one that provides any flexibility. So it's like on the opposite side of this, like on the other hand, if you work a full-time job that's equally as demanding or similarly as demanding, maybe you can do some other things in between. Maybe you can do something that kind of shakes out to be part-time. But still, you are ultimately sacrificing something for something else. That's overemployment, right? So anyway, if you have thoughts on this, please chime in the Q&A, chime in via email, chime in on Instagram, wherever you feel so enthused. And also if you want to send a voice note, as we know. So I'm going to read you this article. I'm just going to bring my laptop. First of all, I want to create, this kind of set the stage. If you remember, we talked about quiet quitting a little bit last year, and quiet quitting is, ultimately this idea that people are effectively just doing their jobs. They're not going above and beyond. They're just doing exactly what they're expected to do. The opposite, well, it's not exactly the opposite, but it's an interesting like juxtaposition. Overemployment, this is a trend that comes from what Career Builder refers to as a combination of factors, including COVID and the COVID pandemic, the quiet quitting trend, and inflation. This I totally agree with, especially on inflation. So I'm just going to read for you. As more people started working remotely during the pandemic, they realized they could do their work more quickly or even take care of two jobs at once. They didn't need to spend time commuting, packing a lunch, or getting dressed for work. They also didn't have to attend meetings or socialize with coworkers. Okay, if I didn't have to attend meetings, I would have a lot of time saved, but I don't know anyone that doesn't attend meetings. So if you're someone that has a job where you don't have to attend meetings, that's very interesting. So that's the one place where I'm like, a stretch. Anyway, however, many workers felt underappreciated during the pandemic. They often received fewer raises, and communication with supervisors and coworkers was reduced. Inflation has lowered the buying power of people's salaries, making work seem less rewarding. Many Americans are looking for additional work to combat inflation, and inflation in the United States is at nearly a 40-year high. According to a survey from Gallup, at least half of the people working in the U.S. are now quiet quitters. Again, quiet quitting, or a quiet quitter, as the article explains, meets job requirements, follows rules, and fulfills their duties, but they don't make any extra effort. They don't work overtime or volunteer for any tasks that aren't part of their job description. After saving time and avoiding stress by working remotely and quiet quitting, many people decided to get more than one remote or partially remote job. So this trend of overemployment is in some ways related to quiet quitting because, as Career Builder has said, they believe that this is one of the factors that has contributed to this trend of overemployment. And what's interesting here is that they say many overemployed people don't work more than 40 hours per week, the conventional amount of time for one full-time job. They can finish tasks faster by avoiding commuting and many of the common distractions of working in an office, like gossip or disagreements between coworkers. People who are overemployed in some fields work 2 or more jobs from home at the same time on different computers. That is very interesting. I just pulled over my work computer to read that article that I had pulled up while I record on my personal computer. So that's very interesting that, here they're kind of talking about doing multiple things at once. I'm recording after hours, but at the end of the day, based on this article, it seems that part of the trend is that people are doing it all at once within that 40 hours. I kind of envy those people. I think if I was able to be overemployed and work 40 hours a week, I'd be feeling pretty good. But it's my choice to be overemployed. It's my choice to have a business. So I'm not complaining. For people who are overemployed and working multiple jobs in a day or in a week, I think what's interesting is that there is a lot of time saved from remote work. This is where inherently remote work can, be perceived to be more productive. I believe I work more productively when I work from home. I also thought I was productive in the office too, but I find that maybe it's the motivation to finish as soon as possible so that I have more time in my day. I don't know. But I do have a flexible remote work from home job. And I do think that if I were in the office, I would be working 40 hours a minimum a week, and I wouldn't have flexibility, and I wouldn't have necessarily the same type of flexibility in being able to run my business. And while I'm fortunate that it doesn't take away from what I do full time in my career outside of my business, it is an interesting idea that people could be taking advantage of this remote culture and environment and doing multiple things at once. It does beg the question of like what sacrifices there might be, because I sometimes even feel that when I'm, working on someone's resume or, preparing like some interview preparation or doing something for my business when my daughters are asleep, I do feel that there is some sacrifice there. Like I'm ultimately sacrificing either my own time or time with my husband or time to do whatever else that I might want to do. And so it makes me wonder if those who are overemployed and working within the workday, multiple jobs, if they feel that they're making a sacrifice either in the quality of work that they're doing or in where they're spending their time, or if it doesn't even matter because inflation is so high that they're just glad to be making some additional income and having, multiple revenue streams, so to speak. So I don't know, it's really interesting, but I thought it was a really interesting trend because most people that at least I know and speak to do have kind of these quote unquote side hustles, as we used to call them, that are no longer really side hustles. They're becoming full-fledged businesses. They're becoming full-fledged time spends for people that I know, including myself. Like there are weeks where I'm like, whew, I'm, working a lot late at night on things for my business or over the weekend. But at the end of the day, if these are things that motivate us, does that then kind of counteract what might be perceived as sacrifice and actually help us to be more engaged in what we're doing, more engaged in the workplace? That would be an interesting survey or question to ask for those who are overemployed, is if they feel that they're making sacrifices in their traditional quote unquote day job that has hired them or contracted them to do work, since they've started doing something else. And actually, as I say that, some people who are overemployed, it sounds like they're working multiple traditional jobs, which I just don't know how that would work. But I guess to Career Builder's point, they're using multiple computers. It's hard for me to wrap my head around because I don't know how people have that kind of time. Like what happens if maybe someone who's overemployed in two traditional jobs or more can answer this for me if you're listening. But like, what happens if your supervisor from job A and your supervisor from job B want or need your time at the same time? What do? Are you prioritizing one over the other? Is it based on how much you earn? Is it based on how much time you dedicate to the jobs? Like, how does that work? How do you, and do you keep it a secret? Like, are you operating like, under the cloak of darkness, so to speak, in having multiple traditional jobs? Has it ever come up on like an employment verification or not? Because you're not providing that information. Like, I want to know the logistics here. I want to speak to someone who has two traditional jobs or more and manages this. So, and I could like dub your voice. I could take your name and make it a pseudonym. So if you are someone that has two traditional jobs and you work them at the same time and you work from home, I want to talk to you so I can understand the logistics, because it's really hard to imagine. I mean, I personally am in meetings most of the day, or I'm working on projects coming out of those meetings most of the day, or like in between meetings. So I physically would not be able to manage or have or hold two separate jobs, like traditional jobs, 9 to 5, quote unquote, obviously, at the same time. It just would not work. So I don't know, maybe it's like depending on your role or your position within a company, but then it's like, at what point, like, do you not want career growth, or do you want career growth? Is there an element here where someone overemployed is a quiet quitter within the job? So they're, kind of just meeting expectations and they're just doing their jobs and that's how they manage it. I don't know. I have a lot of questions. So if you or someone falls into this category, please, I will keep all of your information discreet and private. I really would love to speak with you. With that, I think that's all I've got for you this week. Weigh in on, your thoughts about this in the Q&A. Send me a voice message. Just a reminder, 59 seconds is the max. 60 seconds exactly is when you get cut off. Otherwise, send me an Instagram voice note and I can always play it here, or just listen and respond. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're catching this. And follow me on Instagram, head to my website, subscribe to my newsletter, etc., etc. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.